This is Shakespeare. Hello and welcome back to another video. We're going to be talking about genres for the Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. And as they go on, they're going to get more weird. When I had trouble putting down a game because I really liked it, I'll put a thumbs up sign, which is eerily reminiscent of the like button. Alright, without any further ado, racing. My go-to racer is Yoshi. Racing has become Nintendo's bread and butter with the Mario Kart franchise. It's what brings home the bacon for the company, because it appeals to the casual gamer. It's also a genre that goes way back to the roots of gaming. So we're going to start with racing. Mario Kart Super Circuit. This is a great one. It's a fantastic, classic Mario Kart game for the Game Boy Advance. I definitely recommend it. Ants Racing for the Game Boy Color. And Ants Extreme Racing for the Game Boy Advance. Not bad graphics for the GBA. This here is Cruisin' Exotica for the Game Boy Color. A pretty fun one. Here's the Japanese game Doraemon Kart, which doesn't look great, but I had a hard time putting it down. It was kind of fun. You can pick up items and there's cool little abilities, and the game has kind of a whimsical look. In terms of F-Zero games, you got F-Zero Climax, F-Zero Maximum Velocity, and F-Zero GP Legend. Do I think one of them is better than the others? I don't know. I couldn't really tell. I'm not deep into F-Zero games. For the Game Boy Advance, there's GT Advance 3 Pro Concept Racing and Need for Speed Most Wanted. The Game Boy Color has V-Rally Championship Edition. And finally, Super RC Pro-Am for the Game Boy. (2D). Let's talk about some platformers. Wario, Wario, Wario. Wario, There's some classic 2D platformers on the GBA, but this has got to be the top of the list. I mean, there's so much cool stuff to do in this game. It's got such a cool vibe, and it really set the tone for who Wario is. The one thing I do find funny about a game like this is it stars a villain. There's a lot of stuff now in popular culture where the villain is the hero, like Joker, and like the star of the story in a sense. And I think that's weird. I kind of want to go back to the hero being the hero. Because why are we celebrating villains so much? What does that say about us? But then again, it's fun to play as a villain in a video game, so I don't know. I'm just saying there may be something a little bit sick about culture if we're celebrating villains. But this is a great game, so I don't know what I'm talking about. I love when he gets stung by the bee and has an allergic reaction and floats up in the air. It's funny. You can't talk about platformers on the classic Game Boy without talking about Super Mario Land, the original Super Mario Land. Wow, so fun. I like the second one more, but that's no knock on this one. Great game. With an absolute classic Chef's Kiss soundtrack. Do you want to play a platformer that doesn't have jumping? Try out Bionic Commando. If you can't get enough Bionic Commando, there's also Bionic Commando Elite Forces on the Game Boy Color. Here's a fun indie game. It's called Virtual BMO. Speaking of classic genres, let's talk about shoot 'em ups. Here's the boss rush bullet hell indie game, Dangan, or Dongan, I don't know. Great game. Pretty cool this game could be made on the original Game Boy. Let's go a little atypical here, with the genre of shoot 'em ups, with Burai Fighter Deluxe and Burai Senshi Color. In these games, you're just a guy in a suit jetting around some sort of mechanical space, floating around, shooting things. Beat 'em ups. SD Gundam Force for the GBA is a lot of fun. It's a 2D side-scroller and beat 'em up. And it's a fun one with good power-ups and bosses and things. Check it out. It doesn't get any more classic 90s than Battletoads. And you got Battletoads and Double Dragon. Even more bang for your buck. Two classic teams of beat-em-up heroes teamed up together to cause havoc. Next up is Battletoads Ragnarok's World. And here's one I had a little trouble putting down because it was fun. For the GBA, there's Advanced Guardian Heroes. Some nice colorful graphics here. As well as the licensed game, Disney's American Dragon, Jake Long. Rise of the Hunts Clan. If you're gonna talk about beat 'em ups, you gotta talk about straight up fighting games. And probably the top of the list there would be Street Fighter Alpha 3 for the Game Boy Advance. An amazing accomplishment to put all this on a Game Boy Advance cartridge. And I'm trying to take advantage of the team's hard work and dedication by punching the opponent over and over and over and over and over again with Dulcine to see if I can win the fight just like that. Yes. RPGs. Final Fantasy Adventure is a classic RPG for the Game Boy. It's an action RPG and it's very simple. The story's simple, and the gameplay's simple, and it's enjoyable. And here I'm playing a color hack, which is great. The addition of color really updates this game and makes it look just like brand new. It's nice when an older game can get a fresh coat of paint without losing its soul. On to an indie game that's going to be hard to pronounce. Nilvreth Sagas. This one's enjoyable. I actually had a bit trouble putting this one down. It was fun. Simple graphics, but they get the job done. I don't hate turn-based combat. Here's one that seemed like somebody put a lot of time into making, and I was impressed. Rooney Story. This one's another action RPG like Final Fantasy Adventure. Dungeon Crawlers. Scrolls of Fire is a very hard indie dungeon crawler for the Game Boy Advance. You can see the lineage of games like Gauntlet and Zelda here, as well as many modern games. It's super fun. Tomb Raider games. The Game Boy Color had Lara Croft in Tomb Raider, which was a 2D platformer, sort of Prince of Persia style game. This was followed up on the Game Boy Color by Tomb Raider: Curse of the Sword. It's kind of funny because in the game you're going around a museum at the beginning, but this museum is bonkers. Like, no museum would be shaped like this. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I know platformers are wacky in their setup of spaces, but this is just ridiculous. There were also 2 GBA Tomb Raider games, the first being Lara Croft Tomb Raider: The Prophecy. This is the one I like the most. It's like pseudo 3D, and you know, it's not fantastic, but I had some fun with it. With Lara Croft Tomb Raider Legend, the Game Boy Advance goes back to the Game Boy Color Prince of Persia style Tomb Raider games. And it also does a pretty good job. I'm sure I've seen this scene somewhere before. Horror. 4 of a Kind, a short horror anthology. 4 terrifying stories. This one is mostly text-based with some images, and it's some creepy stories. For example, there's one about a small hole that appears in the wall of the house. And then holes start appearing in the walls all around the house. And when they stick something into the holes, it just keeps going. And there's something in there. Something strange. Stuff like that. You know, Silent Hill 2 for the PlayStation 2 is definitely overrated. I think you gotta go back to the Game Boy Color version to really get the experience of the original. I mean, this is really where it all started with Silent Hill. There's a lot of text in this game. It's called The TV, and it's about someone watching TV. I think it's a kid, although he's alone, so I'm not sure if it's a kid. Things get weirder as the game goes on. The TV starts showing strange things. I don't want to give away too much. This is not a vacation. Aw, you found a cute little worm. What could possibly go wrong? Ah! Flappy Bird. You've got this Flappy Bird for the Game Boy, and this Flappy Bird for the Game Boy, and a game called Flappy, which has a version for the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. Then, of course, you've got Flap the Bird and Flappy Boy. Then there's Flappy Turd. I'm going to need an air freshener for that one. Then on the Game Boy Advance, you've got Cadu Bird. Classic. Then El Jamón Volador, where you're a flying ham. Then there's Bubble Frog, which is a sort of adjacent to Flappy Bird game, where you tap the button to float. And this one's great. I talked about it in a previous video. And finally, one of the grandparents of Flappy Bird, Balloon Kid. As an interesting side note, the original creator of the game Flappy Bird, Dong Nguyen, took the app down from the store in 2014 because he felt that the game was too addictive and was causing negative impacts for people. Which I think is such an interesting thing, right? How often does somebody make a decision like this, where they're willing to sacrifice boatloads of money because they think it'll benefit humanity? To quote the character Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park, "Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should." I like egg-based foods. How about some egg-based games? This is a cool puzzler called Egg, where you carry around an egg and try to solve puzzles. Try to get your egg from one place to another. I had a ton of fun with this one, and I totally recommend it, although I did get stuck at some point. I didn't know what to do at this part, but maybe somebody can give me some tips in the comments section if you figured it out. The eventual goal here, which is the goal of my life, is to carry the egg to the top of the mountain. Let's talk about some B games. This game is not good. The music is mind-numbing and repeats over and over as you replay levels due to its mindless deaths. The graphics are unimpressive. The controls and dynamics of the game are not intuitive. So why did I have so much fun playing this one and was unable to put it down? Maya the Bee for the Game Boy Advance is a kids game, a really good one. I would say it's likely 5 and up if they want to make any real progress. I actually had fun with it. It's a simple platformer where you collect flowers, but it's quite charming. Of course, it's licensed based on some sort of animated movie that I've never seen. And I guess the character goes all the way back to some German children's books. More specifically, The Adventures of Maya the Bee were originally published in 1912. So you got history here. Wait, is that Pokemon? Ooh, Misfortune. This isn't Pokemon. Pokemon Vietnamese Crystal is like as if your mom was a Pokemon video game and she spoke English as a third language. So, what is this game? Pokemon Vietnamese Crystal is a bootleg copy of Pokemon Crystal, and it totally destroys the English language in the best possible way. It may have been translated to Chinese and then translated to Vietnamese and then English or something like that. However it came to be, there's some real gems here in terms of ridiculous dialogue. Go away. Fig. Espin A. Walk on the roof. In Gravitorque, you can walk on the walls, the roof, or the ground. Actually, it's difficult to get around from one place to another, and that's the game. It's a puzzle game. Rusty Flesh is another cool indie game where you can walk on the roof. And of course, Wendy Every Which Way, which is perfectly titled, which you can walk on the roof. Weird pet games. There are so many weird pet games on the GBA. What is this? Mutsu Water Looper. I guess it's based on a weird Japanese toy. There's much more. And here you are taking care of a zoo in Africa. Here's some sort of scientist. And here you are breeding and fighting beetles. Then there's Pets Vets, where you're a new vet, just trying to figure things out. It's day one at the beginning, and it's a new job, and you're just trying to fit in, figure out what's going on, help some pets. Tilt games. Here's a gimmick. Built-in tilt features in your cartridge that you can use in the game to control what's going on screen. On Game Boy Color, we have Kirby's Tilt and Tumble. And on the Game Boy Advance, we have Yoshi Topsy Turvy, which is pretty fun. The tilt functionality is not great, but it works. What about a text adventure on the GBA? Yes, Game Boy Advance has a text adventure. It's called Echoes of the Future, and it's been ported to a lot of different classic systems. But how do you play a text adventure that makes you put in inputs of specific words without a keyboard? Well, you do have a keyboard. It uses a keyboard system made for the GBA called GBA Frauts. And it doesn't work great. It's a pain in the butt. But you can play it. We started with racing games, but you could control those. You don't have any control over idle racers. Watch as 4 racers blindly run around the board towards their goal. Enjoy hours of randomly generated racer content. No need for buttons past the title screen, just sit back and watch. Anomaly spotting games. Imagine you're trapped in an endless underground passageway, and the only way out is to use your memory not to be fooled by anomalies. If you see an anomaly, go back. This is a Game Boy demake version of the game The Exit 8 for PC. It's called Exit 8-Bit. This game is really hard, especially for someone like me, who has a pretty terrible visual memory. But I had a lot of fun with it and was able to get through it. Death Row games. You got the original Death Row, where you have to play over and over again to figure out how not to get executed. This is a fantastically made little game that I covered in a previous video. It's somehow simultaneously very intense and very silly. You got Death Row 2, which is a sequel. This one appears to be quite similar to the first game. And Death Row Brawl, which is a version of the original where fighting takes more center stage. What does it mean to be conscious? Here's some cool games about robots that are emerging into consciousness. This one's kind of a Blade Runner-like one, Citizen RE. Here's one about a family robot called Family Robo. And you're just kind of learning about your past, and you're in the robot factory. And you've been sent back by your owner. Then there's Self-Simulated. This is a little less about AI and a little bit more about Ghost in the Machine. That is a mind or soul inside of a robot. You got some fun 2D platforming gameplay here. Games about opening up, or rather being afraid to open up. What if something bad happened to you, and you were living alone, and you were introverted, and you were going through a tough time, and you didn't have anyone to talk to, but you did? You did have someone to talk to, but you weren't telling them what you're going through? That's what this game's about. It's heavy, but it's kind of beautiful. Post-apocalyptic dating sims. The world's over. You know, times are tough. Things are looking ugly. Mutants and radiation. But nobody wants to be alone. So, why not be on a dating show? You could meet someone. Ask them some questions. See who they are. Different bachelors. I mean, if it's post-apocalyptic, this is the worst time to be alone. Why not find some love? We all deserve some love, right? I'm sure there's some Game Boy games out there that are weirder than this, but this is just surreal and strange and bizarre. Yume Tenshi. What's the simplest way to describe my experience with this game? A labyrinthian branching cavern of insanity and a lucid dream? That's the simplest way. This is Yume Tenshi, an adaptation of Yume Nikki, and it was a 32-bit freeware game for RPG Maker 2003. It was released in 2004. The original game has the theme of a dream diary. It was so weird that it was considered maybe its own genre. The goal of the original game was to seek out and acquire all 24 effects. Meanwhile, there was no plot or dialogue to guide you. So you're just kind of in this abstract game, trying to figure out where to go, what to do. It's kind of beautiful, kind of a horror game, kind of weird. Just perfect to cap off this list. That's all we got today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a lot of fun to make, and I'll come back with something completely different really soon. See you next time.